Even though it wasn't a forensic investigation involving Pete, they still want to use the interview I gave to Debbie Lenhard as evidence. Their goal is to have that interview removed. Thus, they are pursuing it vigorously. They have uploaded something to YouTube and are seeking its removal. On the other hand, maintain it on 8 platforms consistently. The Christian media industry is reeling from Joanie Lamb's audacious demand, which is causing tensions to rise. Some people are upset over Laura Lynn's interview that went viral. Joni is also not remaining silent. She is adamant that it be taken off immediately, getting people to wonder what the interview was about and why it touched them so deeply. Insiders and fans alike are quite excited. Joni would respond so radically about what could possibly be so delicate. The terrible reality behind this demand caught everyone off guard. The story started with an embedded video on a website, something that appeared to be regular old interviews at first. A speaker who talked slowly, thoughtfully, but with evident weight in every word was presented by Laura Lynn, who is famous for her courageous approach and readiness to ask tough questions. The visitor detailed instances of unanticipated delays, individuals who flat out refused to answer their direct inquiries, and documents that went missing. The subtle shock of each detail made people stop and think. Not much happened in the story. There was no noise, just a little. However, it was hard to turn a blind eye to the inconsistencies with the official version. The discrepancies and holes were picked up on by the public almost right once. Their schedules clashed. The video had an urgent, even dangerous vibe due to the conflicting accounts and the guest's tense delivery of the story. Everyone could feel it, not just a select few. A domino effect was quickly created. People started talking about it in church communities, internet forums, and social media groups. While some praised the courageous gesture of speaking the truth, others were afraid of the repercussions. People were immediately divided by the separation, within the course of a single night. As if that weren't disturbing enough, the guest's measured, collected speech added to the impression that something monumental was about to be unveiled, leaving viewers uneasy, since the story didn't line up with the one they'd been made to believe. The video swiftly gained traction beyond the typical internet chit-chat. Individuals positioned closer to concerning the matter, those who had been associated with the ministry or the person's name, started discussing it in private. The interview, they said, led to misunderstandings, made them feel uncomfortable, and made them doubt long-held beliefs. No matter how many times the movie brings up a new point, the contradictory timetable caused people to pause and reevaluate their assumptions. No longer was it merely a narrative. The light shone on a web of interconnected events, a series of choices, and long-simmering mysteries. The video's popularity grew, and it became It was evident that this would not go away quietly. Interviews now commanded the attention of viewers who would have otherwise scrolled past them. They spoke about every word, watched parts again, and shared video with others. From what was initially just one upload turned become a topic that people just couldn't stop talking about. The video had already made an impression when people became aware of it. A thoughtful interview can have more of an effect than 1,000 pieces of publicity, and it did all this while revealing holes in a well-known story and challenging presumptions. Releases. Not only was the video content that went viral, this event served as a starting point for a larger discussion and garnered attention that would continue to intensify in the following days. The video was never going to remain silent once it started making the rounds. Viewers and insiders alike were moved by Laura Lynn's interview, and it had an instant impact. The revelation sparked widespread conversation, with numerous social media posts, lively online forums, and church groups devoting time and energy to discussing the new information, and the questions never stopped flowing. Curiosity was the driving force for many. But that was concerning for Joanie Lamb. Not a light-hearted conversation, but a danger one that may damage reputations, derail the ministry, and destroy the years of hard work she and Marcus had put in together, was how she perceived the tape. The response within Daystar was immediate and critical. Joni did not take this lightly, according to her friends and family. She quickly contacted people, communicated via text and phone, and ordered her associates to move swiftly. She commanded, "Take down the video." You could hear the tone. Disagreement or postponement had no place. The idea was not mild. She issued a strong and immediate order to stop the spread of something she thought was harmful. Those closest to her were aware of how serious the situation was. There was no room for carelessness here. Protecting her loved ones, the ministry, and her legacy was at the heart of this. However, the online environment is not like a confined space. Requests to delete content frequently backfire. A video's popularity grows in direct proportion to the number of attempts to remove it. I saw screenshots. Other outlets duplicated the clips. People who were already aware of the effort to delete the interview were much more adamant about finding it, watching it, and sharing it. Suppressing the video in the first place guaranteed that it would contact a lot more people than if it hadn't been touched. It appeared like every time Joni tried to control the situation, more and more people were interested and wanted to talk about it. The public's response was swift. After seeing the effort to delete the video, many were curious about had never been brought up earlier. Many stood behind Joni, thinking she was within her rights to keep her family safe in the ministry she had just taken over. For others, the change indicated that something vital was being kept under wraps. Reporters started looking into it, and the topic shifted beyond social media into news programs, editorials, and discussion shows. The video was no longer just an interview. It had evolved into a public investigation of power dynamics in the digital era, a control test, and a transparency discussion. On the inside of Daystar, things were chaotic. Members of staff observed rushed meetings, rushed phone calls, and several revisions of written remarks. It was obvious to everyone that their efforts to contain the problem were only drawing greater attention to it. Legal counsel was sought to refute the story. Messages were prepared. The video was shown in a negative light, with the idea that unfounded accusations could ruin decades-long reputations being emphasized. According to Joni's staff, the content was leading to misunderstanding and the spread of misinformation, and they desired so that people would remember that she was fighting for truth and protection, not censorship per se. The video would not go away, no matter what I did. It continued to circulate as more and more people uploaded screenshots in response to each removal. Those not affiliated with members of the ministry who, had they not been interviewed, would have been completely unaware of it were now brought up in conversation. As interest and encouragement surged, Laura Lynn's audience grew. Her message was echoed with every effort to have the clip removed. She remained unmoved, declining any form of apology or pull the plug on her show. Her framing was sparse. The interview was significant because everyone has a right to know the facts, so they may make an informed decision. Viewers who had become cynical of repression and quiet, in an age when information could be strictly regulated, almost instantly, the widening gap was apparent. Those who saw Laura Lynn as an example of bravery and openness formed one camp. Her courage to pose challenging topics and provide a voice to those whose narratives were underrepresented. The film was seen by Joni's supporters as careless, damaging, and insulting to the people concerned. Reputations and confidential information were of the utmost importance to them. A diagram was created, and no longer was the conversation limited to a single venue or set of listeners. It had spread across the country, involving hitherto unengaged online platforms, newsrooms, and faith communities. Controversy persisted beyond the video's subject matter. A broader discussion ensued regarding power, credibility, and sway in the age of technology. Efforts to erase the interview brought to light the difficulties faced by public personalities when news travels at an uncontrollable pace. The pressure increased with each new share, upload, or repost. After viewers caught wind of the cuts and took them to mean that something was being concealed, even though Joni had planned to keep the problem under control, the Strand effect was making it worse. Tensions rose as time went on. Separate from the video itself was the dispute over it. Concerns over the trade-off between privacy and data control were voiced as a result. At home, families whispered about it. Passions flared in the online discourse. The headlines and posts started to catch the attention of even those who weren't very interested in religious media. I am perplexed as to why there were initiatives to eliminate even a single interview. Everyone was keeping tabs on Joni's squad and questioning their every move. In a time when information travels at the speed of light, the public was discovering how challenging it was to control the narrative. As for Laura Lynn, maintained her stance that it was not her job to criticize anyone but to facilitate free-flowing discussion. Viewers who appreciated honesty and openness admired her measured replies. Instead than getting the clip farther away with each push from Joni, Laura's voice reached farther away with each push. It had evolved into more than just an interview. It has come to represent the tension between secrecy and openness, between privacy and public scrutiny, and between power and transparency. The gravity of the issue became apparent by the conclusion of the first week. Hundreds of thousands of people had viewed the interview in some way. The narrative had progressed beyond a single forum or discussion. Reporters, hosts of talk shows, and pundits started chiming in. The dispute about whether or not to remove the footage became an issue of public responsibility, censorship, and the boundaries of control in today's media environment. While Joni's goal was to remove the tape, she inadvertently increased interest, sparking a national conversation about power, responsibility, and the truth surrounding a single interview. The story would be defined by the video and any effort to delete it. The impression of a power struggle was reinforced by Joni's team's constant resistance, deletion attempts, and statements. Viewers were taking careful notes to help them choose who to believing in, whose narrative was important, and the extent to which influence should shape public perception. At this point, the footage was more than just a broadcast, a challenge to power, a test of transparency, and a perfect example of how attempts to suppress information in the digital era frequently backfire. It had become difficult to overlook. The story swiftly spread beyond the limitations of a single video platform, as Laura Lynn's interview kept getting shared. What began as a mundane show quickly became a divisive and contentious topic. Everywhere, individuals seemed to be discussing it. There was a flurry of activity on social media. People who had never met Daystar or Laura Lynn before found themselves immediately involved in the discussion, whether it was in houses, community groups, or churches. The video had become viral, generating a great deal of interest and inspiring individuals to reevaluate their assumptions about responsibility, openness, and leadership. There was quick polarization among viewers. There were those who viewed Laura Lynn as an inspiration, a courageous journalist who dared to expose previously hidden truths. All eyes were on her boldness and determination to provide her guest with an opportunity to openly express themselves. This wasn't simply an interview. In the eyes of these backers, I was astounded. Questions that had been hushed but never spoken aloud before found an outlet in it, feeling as though they were seeing the discovery of facts that had been contained with great care. The discrepancies were examined, timings were examined, and previous remarks and posts were revisited to compare with the interviewee's claims. The video served a purpose beyond mere amusement for them. The data was there, duty, and maybe even fairness. Those who sided with Joanie Lamb had a totally different take on the video, finding the truth wasn't important to them. It dealt with carelessness. According to their logic, Laura Lynn's platform was being carelessly utilized to spark controversy, endangering families and reputations. Permitting the interview to be online, they said, could cause actual harm because it included unproven allegations and the guest's remarks were biased or deceptive. Keeping everyone concerned safe, their utmost priority was upholding integrity and avoiding needless anguish. They didn't see Joni's efforts to delete the video as censorship, but as a responsible step toward protecting people from harmful or inaccurate messages. As a result of the disagreement between these two schools of thought, an ecological setting, off of what started off as civil talks, furious arguments broke out. At the dinner table, families fought. There was a social media unfollowing between friends. Community forums, however, became into arenas for heated debate. With the debut of The Fire, was fueled by the upload, clip, or conversation. Efforts to manipulate the storyline through censorship or exaggeration were always questioned. People were judging the video's authenticity, objectives, and motives by watching how others reacted to it. Even non-religious media journalists and analysts started to take note. Ideas surrounding free speech, responsibility, and the roles of public personalities in the internet era were sparked by the tale, which went beyond its initial target audience. Industry insiders offered their opinions about the moral weight of censorship versus privacy protection. Legal professionals deliberated over the possible outcomes of airing and eliminating contentious content. Those who normally avoided discussing religious topics on church media found themselves swept up in the controversy. Driven by the conflict between openness and authority, the focus shifted away from the interview and onto other topics. It had devolved into a discussion about cultural norms on the authority to govern information and the proper scope of influence. Laura Lynn became a symbol of rebellion for many in this setting. She refused to retract or apologize for her interview. All she wanted to say was this: people should listen to the speaker without bias and make up their own minds. Viewers who had become suspicious of repression, silence, and stories that looked hand-picked. With each attempt by Joni to have the video removed, Laura's voice became more strident, her following expanded, and the tale became increasingly uncontrollable. The irony of information control in the digital age is highlighted by the fact that Joni's desired lack of attention was actually brought about by what she saw as an effort at censorship. Entire planet. On the other hand, those who stood by Joni's side never wavered in their defense of her intentions. They highlighted her extensive leadership experience, the significance of safeguarding reputations, and the risks of unsubstantiated claims propagating uncontrolled. In their view, anybody in the event that her family, legacy, or ministry were to come under danger, she would respond in a like manner. The stakes were huge for them. She had spent years cultivating this platform's reputation, and this was her way of protecting it. Their stance was that her actions demonstrated accountability rather than concealment, and context was necessary, not merely spectacular sound bites. Truth, perspective, and purpose all started to blend together as the argument progressed. The general public had to make a trust and belief system decision based on the interview's content. Others agreed with Laura Lynn, placing a premium on openness and the freedom to challenge authority figures. Protective measures, caution, and accountability were prioritized over direct exposure by those who agreed with Joni. Those who tried to remain impartial frequently got themselves entangled in disputes from both sides, and there were very few people in the center on either side. Questions of power, honesty, and the media's influence on public opinion were reflected in the video, which had become a reflection of society at large. The passionate debate brought the conflict's human dimension to light. Scofflawed families argued in the comfort of their living homes, contemplating the secrets revealed and the information withheld. Daystar fans had mixed feelings for a long time. Rather of being curious about the inconsistencies brought out in the interview, they were loyal to the ministry they had trusted for years. Some felt deceived, terrified that their previously held beliefs could be called into doubt. For some it was a relief, as if long-suppressed queries could be finally voiced because long-buried realities were beginning to surface. As time went on, the interview and its subsequent reactions started to shift the focus away from both Joanie Lamb and Laura Lynn. In the eyes of individuals who cherish openness, Laura Lynn's bravery and credibility increased, while Joni's leadership was examined differently, judged on how she dealt with this technological obstacle as well as her previous achievements. Here is the deal, served as a timely reminder of the power of perception, the fluidity of narratives, and the ability of an informative film to spark discussions that reach far beyond its initial target. This was obviously not a one-off incident by the weekend's end. It featured a nationwide conversation around the nature of influence, data, and power in the modern internet era. Disagreements were laid bare in the public discussion, which prompted important inquiries regarding accountability and leadership. It also demonstrated how, in this digital age, a single voice can surpass the power of a whole institution in ways that were unthinkable even a decade ago. Individuals were no longer reliant on information as a passive consumer. The discussion was far from finished, and they were both engaged in a fight for power, truth, and trust. Attempts to discredit Laura Lynn's interview and its aftermath became increasingly apparent as time went on.
Eradicating it had left an indelible mark, not only for the two ladies featured in the video, but for everyone else who paid attention. What started out as a singular video had transformed into a watershed moment. The plot was becoming less important. Dependability was at the heart of the matter. Direction, and the fundamental manner in which individuals interact with data in the modern day. It became nearly meaningless to have original intentions because every choice, public comment, and deleted or attempted deleted clip was examined, deconstructed, and shared again. Unexpected ways were causing the repercussions to play out. The public used the experience as a prism to analyze accountability and power. Difficult questions started to be asked. Who gets to decide what happens next, and for what purpose? For what reason was it necessary to remove the video? Also, how does that reflect on the leadership team in question? The questions posed were concrete. Many viewers had been used to regulated information access and tailored messaging in religious and media environments, so they connected with them on a deep level. The fight, what began as an interview, soon expanded into a more in-depth discussion of openness, responsibility, and power. An unforeseen outcome resulted from Joanie Lamb's efforts to safeguard her ministry and reputation. The impact of the video was magnified and more intense interest. People who normally wouldn't have paid attention were now glued to the screen, taking note of every word spoken and gesture made in reaction to the scandal. People started talking about it in all sorts of venues, including online forums, news programs, and even informally at home and at work. As a public litmus test, the film demonstrated how fast narratives can change and how readily trust can be betrayed in today's hyper-connected society. Those who cherished openness and responsibility saw Laura Lynn, whether on purpose or not, as a symbol of defiance. With her, she maintained her credibility in the eyes of many by refusing to retract the interview and insisting that viewers judge for themselves. Joni was not personally attacked by her. She did nothing more than lay out the stage and let the plot to develop. Many viewers, sick of carefully selected content, related to such straightforward approach, stories, premeditated messages, and restricted data access. The interview with Laura Lynn was more than just reporting to them. A dedication to honest dialogue and an unwillingness to cover up unpleasant realities under the guise of authority were symbolized by it. In contrast, Joanie Lamb must deal with proponents of her conduct contended that they were both responsible and essential. Leadership, they said, is about more than just making an impact, it's also about taking responsibility. They insisted that families, reputations, and the community that Daystar had helped to establish could be seriously damaged if unfounded charges were allowed to spread. The people around Joni believed that she was defending what had been worked on for decades out of a sense of duty and not ego. The contentiousness surrounding her removal attempt reflected the difficulty many leaders have in striking a balance between public scrutiny and individual accountability. Interconnected global community, both perception and practice were affected by the collision in the long run. Not only was the interview's content being scrutinized, but also the reactions it provoked. They raised concerns regarding data management and the processes involved in deciding to remove content chosen, and the kind of the leadership and priorities shown by those choices. More than simply who had spoken, public opinion was changing. Who did what, when, and why was the central question. The video served as a standard by which the reliability, expertise, and openness from everyone engaged. This incident demonstrated how delicate public confidence is for Daystar and its leadership. All of a sudden, what had been assumed, a steady, uncontested story was open to debate. Those who had shown faithfulness, spectators, were left to ponder the intentions behind the content, review previously made assertions, and search for proof in order to comprehend it. A leader's audience may grow more and further apart with each slip-up, indecision, or decision to limit information. Trust, which was once implicit, had to be actively defended. Simultaneously, the episode served as an example of the impact of digital media. What started off as a simple interview video ended up having far-reaching consequences. It proved the speed with which information can travel, the ease with which public opinion can be formed, and the suppressing information can have disastrous consequences. Media literacy, critical thinking, and the value of considering alternative viewpoints were among the lessons it became for many. People were paying attention, asking questions, and actively participating in the conversation because of the video, which had become a catalyst for larger involvement. Debates that were hitherto reserved for select individuals. The effects on social dynamics continued into the future as well. Members of the church community, as well as friends and family, found themselves discussing the topic, gathering evidence, and drawing conclusions from the interview and its reaction. The disagreement has a subtle but significant impact on people's lives, compelling them to find a balance between loyalty and skepticism, faith and curiosity, and trust and verification. Everyone watching had joined a cultural dialogue around transparency, power, and the boundaries of influence. The event further cemented Laura Lynn's position as a journalist prepared to question accepted narratives. According to her, it drove home to Joanie Lamb the need of balancing authority in a world where data is not completely under one's control. A pair of ladies stepped out of the controversy with the extent to which their reputations are impacted by both the content and their reactions to it. Media executives and religious groups alike would look back on the interview and its reception as a watershed event in the information age. In the end, the experience demonstrated that efforts to regulate data hardly succeed over the long haul. Less attention-grabbing than the original material itself can be the removal, silencing, or repression of it. Both the facts and the public's reaction to them influence public opinion. A case study on the dynamics of contemporary media emerged from the interview with Laura Lynn and Joanie Lamb's response. More informed and involved than ever before, the people made up their own minds about what to think after hearing one speaker pique their interest and another advocate for power. Significant repercussions were felt in the future. Faith had been challenged, things had changed in the narrative, and now the story was a real-life illustration of how the digital realm is a collision ground for influence, openness, and authority.